Most videos about wealth levels tell you what life looks like at each number. What kind of house? What kind of vacations? How relaxed or stressed you probably feel. But that's not actually useful. You already know what your life looks like. What you probably don't know is what's quietly going wrong at your specific level. Because the mistake that costs people the most changes completely as the number changes. In 12 plus years working with families from every one of these levels, it's never the mistake that you would expect. So here are 7 levels of retirement wealth in America. At each one, I'll show you the thing I keep seeing go wrong, the thing nobody at that level sees coming. Find yours and pay attention, because what matters at your level is often the opposite of what matters one level up or down. I'm Daniel Miller, and I help families steward their wealth with purpose and generosity. If you like content like this video and subscribe for more. And if you want help figuring out exactly where you land and what to do about it, there's a link below to book some time with me. Now, the 7 levels. Level number 1, under $250,000. At this level, Social Security is doing most of the heavy lifting. Whatever savings exist are more of a cushion than an actual income source. And the advice people hear at this stage usually sounds like some version of, you need protection, you need guaranteed income, you can't afford to lose what little you have, which is reasonable sounding, but here's what it leads to. I've watched people at this level get sold products out of fear rather than strategy. A whole life policy with premiums that strain your budget. An annuity that locks up the only liquid money they have. A second layer of insurance stacked on coverage they already carry. Each one gets pitched as protection. But what it actually does is quietly drain the exact savings it was supposed to protect. On $200,000 total, every dollar matters. And $250 or $300 a month funneling into products that don't serve the plan is $3,000 plus a year that's gone. Over a decade, that adds up to a real chunk of the portfolio. It's not lost to the market, not to bad luck, but lost to fear. The expensive thing at this level was never the small balance. It's making decisions from fear instead of information. Once you cross $250,000 though, the mistake changes entirely. Level 2, $250,000 to $500,000. Here's something that tends to surprise people. Picture 2 60-year-olds, both retiring at age 62 with exactly $400,000 saved. It's the same number on paper. One has it all in traditional 401k, so every withdrawal is taxed as ordinary income, so depending on the bracket and the state, they might keep somewhere around 75 to 80 cents of every dollar they pull. The other has the same $400,000 in a Roth, so every dollar comes out tax-free. The full amount is theirs. It's the same starting balance, but over 25 years, that difference in after-tax spending power can run into tens of thousands of dollars. And it's not because of better investment picks, it's because of where the money was sitting the whole time. Most people never think about their savings this way. They see a number on a statement and assume that's what they have to spend, but it isn't. What's left after the IRS takes its cut is the real number, the one that actually determines what retirement feels like. At this level, with less room for error than higher up the ladder, that gap between statement balance and usable income is exactly where retirements come up short. If you've never actually broken down your savings by account type, whether that's traditional or Roth IRA, brokerage accounts, cash, that's worth doing. Because the goal was never just saving $400,000. It's making sure as much of it as possible is actually yours when you need it. But once you cross $500,000, and the problem stops being about the money entirely. Level 3, $500,000 to $1 million. Something interesting happens here for the first time. The math can genuinely work. $500,000 to $1 million combined with Social Security and a solid plan is enough to fund a comfortable retirement for a lot of people. Most people at that level don't feel that way though. They feel behind, and it's almost always for the same reason: comparison. An article claims the average retiree needs $2 million. A coworker mentions their number at dinner. Someone online retired at 55 with $3 million, and suddenly $750,000 feels small by comparison. That feeling causes more damage than most actual financial mistakes do, because it pushes people in one of two directions. Some start chasing. They think, I need to catch up. So they concentrate too much into one stock or one sector, a bet that could wipe out 30% in a rough year. On $750,000, that's $225,000. That's not a setback, that's years of retirement income. Others go the opposite way and just stop trying. They say, what's the point of optimizing if I'll never have enough anyway? The Roth conversion never happens. The Social Security analysis never gets done. And a retirement that could have worked with the right structure stays stuck because nobody ever ran the numbers for this specific life. The expensive thing here was never the balance, but it's measuring your number against someone else's. The number that matters isn't $2 million, and it isn't whatever the neighbor has. It's whatever supports your life. And that number is usually more reachable than people think once they stop looking sideways. Once you cross $1 million, you'd expect the anxiety to ease up, but it doesn't. It gets worse, and it's for a reason that most advisors never bring up. Level 4, $1 million to $2 million. You would think crossing 7 figures would feel secure, but in my experience, it often does the opposite because now the swings feel enormous. A 10% drop on $100,000 is $10,000. It's uncomfortable, but it's abstract. A 10% drop on $1.2 million is $120,000. That feels like a disaster, even though a 10% dip on a portfolio built for a 25-year time horizon is a blip that the plan should be designed to absorb. But it doesn't feel like a blip. And at this level, the balance quietly becomes the household's emotional thermostat. The market's up 5%, we're in a good mood. The trip's back on. If the market's down 8%, we're in a bad mood, and the trip gets postponed, and somebody's awake at 2 a.m. wondering if they should move everything to cash. The number on the screen starts running how people think about their entire future. And that's a problem because feelings drive decisions. The person checking the balance every morning is the one who ends up selling near the bottom. The person whose mood tracks the market is the one who pushes retirement back just to be safe, even when the plan already says they're ready. I've sat with clients who had genuinely solid plans that we stress tested against bad markets, inflation, healthcare surprises, and they still couldn't pull the trigger because the balance dipped 6% last quarter. The plan said go, the spreadsheet said go, but the feeling said wait, and so they waited. The expensive thing here isn't a financial mistake at all. It's letting the portfolio run your emotions instead of letting the plan inform your decisions. If you're checking your balance more than once a week, that's not diligence. That's the thermostat running the show. So if you're somewhere in that $500,000 to $2 million range, and some of this is landing a little close to home, that's exactly where my team and I spend most of our time. There's a link below if you want to schedule a time to look at your specific situation. There's no pressure or pitch, just clarity on where you're at and what you should expect moving forward. Once you cross $2 million and the whole problem flips, the mistake becomes the last thing you'd expect from anyone with this much saved. Level 5, $2 million to $3.5 million. This might be the most counterintuitive level on the list because the expensive mistake here isn't spending too much, it's not spending enough. I've seen this pattern more times than I can count. Someone worked 30 years, saved aggressively, lived below their means, did everything they were told to do, and did it well enough to end up with $2.5 to $3 million, more than they ever imagined having, and they can't spend it. It's the same restaurants they've eaten at for a decade, the same car, 12 years running, a trip canceled feeling too expensive even though it cost less than 0.5% of their net worth. Genuine agonizing over a $200 dinner with friends, not because they can't afford it, but because 30 years of training told them not to. That saving muscle doesn't just switch off because the number got big. It's the strongest financial habit they have, and in retirement, it turns into a cage. Research on withdrawal behavior backs this up. Wealthy retirees consistently pull far less than they safely could. It's not 4%, it's often closer to 2%. It's not because that's the right number, it's because spending still feels dangerous even when the math says otherwise. Here's the part that's hard to say. If you've got $3 million and you're living like you have $500,000, you didn't build wealth, you accumulated a number. Wealth is supposed to buy the freedom to actually live the life the work was for. If you get there and still can't bring yourself to live it, The number didn't do its job. The expensive thing at this level is the trip that never got taken. The years spent worrying about a portfolio that was never actually in danger. And if you recognize yourself here, you probably don't need a better plan. You need someone to look at the actual numbers, not the feeling, and tell you it's genuinely okay to use what you've built. But once you push past $3.5 million and the risk stops being about daily habits, it becomes about the decisions you can't take back. Level 6, $3.5 million to $5 million. At this range, daily spending is basically noise. An extra $500 a month in restaurant bills against a $4 million portfolio isn't going to break anything. The danger here is a different category entirely. The big, irreversible calls. A vacation home, a large gift to a child, early retirement without modeling a decade of healthcare before Medicare, a major renovation, funding a kid's business. Every one of these can feel completely affordable in the moment. And at this balance, it might be. But can we afford it is the wrong question. The right one is, what does this permanently change? A $600,000 vacation home doesn't cost $600,000. It adds property tax, maintenance, insurance, travel costs, forever. It reduces liquidity. It creates a fixed expense that doesn't disappear if markets turn. A $150,000 gift to one child might be genuinely affordable, but if it sets an expectation the other kids now hold you to, or the recipient comes back a second time, the real cost of that gift is a lot bigger than the check that was written. And that expectation can't be unset. Early retirement at 56 might look great on a spreadsheet, but if nobody modeled in 9 years of private health coverage before Medicare, or the tax impact of withdrawals during that bridge, or what happens if a spouse needs care at 70, the plan that looked airtight at 56 can feel very different at 65. What I see at this level isn't carelessness. It's confidence, earned confidence, because the money is real and the decision genuinely might be affordable. But confidence without stress testing is where the expensive mistakes happen. It's not because the decision was wrong on its face, because nobody asked what it would change about everything else. And then there's the top of the range, where the biggest failure has almost nothing to do with money at all. Level 7, $5 million to $10 million plus. At this level, the financial plan is usually excellent. Diversified investments, an active tax strategy, estate documents in place, everything structured. On paper, this family looks completely set. What I've noticed though, the money is perfectly organized and the family often is not. The spouse who never handled the finances has never been a part of the conversations. If something happens to the one who managed it all, the other is suddenly navigating a complex picture they've never once been included in. The kids know there's money. They don't know the plan. They don't know what's coming or why it's structured the way it is, so they fill in the blanks themselves, and some of those assumptions turn into resentment or entitlement, or both, once nobody's corrected them. I've watched flawless estate plans fall apart within a family the moment the wealth actually transferred. Not because the paperwork was wrong, because nobody ever sat everyone down and had the conversation. At this size, the money is going to outlive the person who built it. That part's a certainty, which means people who didn't earn it and may not understand what it was for will eventually be the ones deciding what happens to it. If the only investment was in the structure and nothing went into the family's ability to actually talk about it, the wealth becomes a fault line instead of a foundation. The failure here was never a tax mistake or a flawed estate plan. It was assuming that getting the money right automatically meant the people were taken care of. If your plan is solid and you've never had these conversations with the people it's meant to protect, that's the real gap, because the plan isn't finished until the people it's for actually understand it. Those are the 7 levels. And what connects all of them is this: the mistake that costs the most is never the one you'd guess. Wherever you are, the planning that helps you is specific to that level, and advice that works one rung up can genuinely hurt where you are. If you want the fuller picture, not organized by wealth level this time, but by specific traps that show up across all of them, I made a video on exactly that. 5 traps I keep seeing families walk into with real stories behind each one. If you want to make sure you're not quietly stepping into one of them right now, that's the one to watch next. I'll see you there.